Power sector in Nigeria is crucial to the national development of a nation. And this is as the Niger Delta Power Holding Company has now continued to foster collaboration with key stakeholders in the country to ensure the issue of epileptic power supply is reduced. But with the series of national grid collapses, it is imperative that all power players come to terms and find a lasting solution to the challenges in the sector. Joining me for more on this is Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Niger Delta Power Holding Company, Jennifer Adighije. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Upon assumption of office just last year in August rather, you explained that strategic focus of your administration would be on asset performance, process optimization, and human capital. What can you tell us in form of progress that you've recorded?
Thank you very much, Abosede, for this opportunity to speak to Nigerians. I also want to use the opportunity to thank Mr. President for giving me the opportunity of occupying such a pivotal role in government. It's a privilege that I do not take for granted, because the privilege of service is also an opportunity to change the narrative, and therefore I am grateful for this opportunity. Upon assumption of office in August last year, we communicated our vision in very clear terms to the entire staff of the NDPHC, and that was very crucial in the sense that my leadership is one that is inclusive, and that is because our goals, our corporate goals, ought to be shared. And therefore, every staff has a role to play. Beyond being a partaker, every staff has a role to play in participation to attain those goals. And therefore, the vision is essentially built around the optimization of the performance of our power plants, which is pillar one. And that is to ensure that we can enhance our revenue earning potentials. And then the pillar two is to optimize our processes to be able to drive efficiency across the organization. And then pillar three, which rests upon leveraging human capital and technology to drive and sustain organizational transformation over time. And more so, we came prepared actually with a winning plan and a winning strategy. And so by the support of my staff, we've been able to hit some major milestones, in the early months of my leadership. For instance, we've been able to come up with a robust recovery plan for all our generating units and all our power plants, across the entire fleet. And we're hoping that by the end of the year, we'll be able to restore all our units where we have outages. The target is for Q4 2025. We also have a robust debt recovery plan, and we're already making progress. We're able to recover significant amounts of debt from our bilateral customers, home and abroad. We're also able to come up with a plan for recovery of assets. We had quite a number of our assets that were stranded at the ports, stranded at different locations, and very recently we rescued about 120 containers from the Onne seaport. By the collaboration and with the support of the CG of Customs, we're able to recover, and we're still discovering more containers and packages that are littered across the ports. We've also been able to make improvements generally across all departments and across all the strategic business units within the organization. And lastly, collaboration has also helped us, achieve most of the milestones that we've set. We collaborate particularly with the regulator. As you would know, that the sector is highly regulated, and we have a regulator that is very fair and very efficient. And so we're collaborating with all the stakeholders across the entire value chain and across the three segments of the power sector, which is the distribution, generation, and transmission. And so we've been able to make significant progress, and I'm really looking forward to the journey ahead.
The journey ahead, indeed, you're looking forward to it, and I'm sure that people also are looking forward to, what the company will be bringing on board. NDPHC has about 10 power plants. And I'm curious, have you been able to visit each of these power plants? And if that is the case, what can you say about how they are performing at this time?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Yes, we have 10 power plants, but 7 are commercially operational and 3 are still under construction. Not only have I visited the power plants, I've visited most of them more than once. And that's because, as you know, I'm an engineer and I'm very hands-on. And operations and maintenance is actually my priority in ensuring that we're able to drive revenues from generation. So let me also mention that the performance of a power plant is primarily measured by a parameter called the PAF, which is the plant availability factor. And that plant availability factor is determined by the efficiency of the units. And it's the efficiency of the units that determines your generation outputs. And so over time, in the restoration and recovery program that we've come up with, and a robust also, let me also mention, we have a robust maintenance plan now. And so we're doing more of preventive maintenance, and this would ensure that the efficiency of our plants and our units remain optimal. So yes, our plans are very focused and central to our vision, which is to optimize the performance of those plants to drive revenues, which we all know is driven by the demand in the market segment. And we're well positioned to operate these units more efficiently.
You mentioned that 7 of the plants are operational and 3 are not. What is the state of those 3, and what are you doing to make them efficient?
Those 3 units are plants where we had certain contractual issues with the previous contractor that were handling the power plants, and therefore those power plants, the contracts were reawarded to new contractors that are currently work in progress on the sites. So they're construction sites basically where we're making progress. We have a schedule of works, and the contractors we've set targets, and we also have a recovery plan for them to ensure that we're able to attain progress and recover the lost time that we've lost on the power plants. And we're making progress significantly to restore those units as well.
All right, because, having everything on board would be critical to really, helping to boost the power sector. It was in the news recently that the NDPHC added about 200 megawatts to the national grid. But you know what? Nigerians are still not feeling the impact. As it is, in 2024 alone, we witnessed an unprecedented number of grid collapses and disturbances. Why is this so?
Boss, let me also mention that impact is a gradual phenomena. And you must also realize that we have 250 million Nigerians. So when you're monitoring any trend, in Nigeria or tracking progress, expect a slow start, because the rate of change would naturally be slow. But I beg to differ, and let me just enlighten you. If you've come in contact with the Q3 reports or any of the reports published by the regulator, you will find that in the generation subsector that we have increased our generation outputs by 16.4% in Q3. The Q4 reports are not yet out, but I'm also expecting a ramp up of that generation output. And then more so, or to strengthen the argument, we've also recorded improvements in energy access. We've gone from 59% to 64%, and these are data that are published by the regulator, and I don't think there could be any more valid or more credible data than the data being published by the regulator. So certainly looking from a GENCO lens or from a GENCO perspective, I believe we're making progress. We might not be where we want to be yet, but we're certainly not where we used to be. If we have generation, our generation outputs increasing by 16.4%, what that essentially means is that the consumption also has increased, because you cannot generate what is not consumed. It's an industry that is driven by the downstream market and by the demand and by consumption. So I would say that we're making progress in terms of our outputs, and the impact would be felt over time.
Generation is one arm, of the whole value chain. And just as you've mentioned, distribution Precisely. Is also key. And as you mentioned earlier also about collaborations to ensure that these impacts are actually felt by the average Nigerian in their homes and on the street.
Absolutely.
Now, talking about, the staff of the NDPHC, human capital is about the greatest assets that any country or organization would have. But we know that there have been some complaints of discrimination among some staff of your organization. Have you been made aware of this, and what are you doing to, allay the affairs and create an environment where they can all thrive?
I agree with you, Boss. For me, the human capital, and my staff are the driving force. You know, I call them the wind beneath my wings. And that's because the human capital are essentially the lifeblood of any thriving institution. And upon assumption of office, by the way, they're not crying for discrimination. They're just agitating for a conversion to a more recognizable status, you know, a better status as NDPHC staff. But let me just take you back in history so that you understand the genesis of these issues. Now, the NDPHC was incorporated as a special vehicle to implement the National Integrated Power Project, which is the NIPP. And so because we were set up to implement a project that was already existing. As a project, you know, a lot of the pioneer staff were engaged as third-party manpower, which is the standard process in engineering procurement and EPC contracts generally. So a lot of those staff that we're talking about were contracted through a third-party vendor. And unfortunately, over the years, they were not able to regularize their status to full-time NDPHC staff. So upon assumption of office, when I visited all the power plants, you know, it was a recurring theme, you know, across, because the staff were all agitating for conversion. And I made a commitment to them that, you know, we would look into it as management, though we know it's subject to the board approval. But very graciously, I've received the support of the chairman of our board, His Excellency the Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, and the process is ongoing for us to convert these staff to full-time NDPHC staff. And so, and it's not a decision that I believe that we would regret, because we're already beginning to see the impact on our productivity, you know, the sense of job satisfaction that is driving our improvements, you know, across all our units. And so the process is ongoing. I've communicated to all the staff and they're happy about it. And like I said, central to my vision is staff welfare and job satisfaction, and I'm driving it very keenly.
When we come back, that conversation continues. Please stay with us.
Talk about the automation of government activities in Lagos without soft alliance. The Oracle implementation itself is pioneered, implemented, ran, training of staff, and everything was done by Soft Alliance. And since then, the journey has been very interesting. And we've done many other things apart from Oracle implementation. And you know that seems to be the bedrock of our digitalization. So I want to congratulate Soft Alliance, because not many companies can survive 20 years in a very dynamic and tedious environment like ours.
Thank you for staying with us. We're talking about the Niger Delta Power Holding Company and the power generation in general in Nigeria. My guest is the MDC of the NDPHC. Let's talk about debts. Earlier, you were talking about the fact that you've succeeded in recovering some assets that were out there. But just how much is the NDPHC being owed presently? And, what are you doing to get some of these assets and, resources back?
Boss, I really wouldn't want to speak to figures, but let me just explain. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a sector that is driven by the downstream markets, by consumption and by demand. And there are 4 key parameters that drive the downstream. One is your billing efficiency, your collection efficiency, the ATC and C losses, which is the aggregate technical and commercial losses, and then the disco remittances, which is where we derive our own settlements from as the GENCOs. Now, prior to this administration, and let me also very specially commend the Honorable Minister, Dr. Bayo Adelabu, for coming up with some bold and audacious initiatives and reforms, that aim to transform the industry, graciously approved and supported by Mr. President. I can tell you that at this time last year, we were getting about 9% invoice settlement. on the electricity that we supply to the grid. But as of today, that has gone up to about 38%. And this is an industry where in the tariff order, that gas is a run-through cost, and the gas that we use to fire our turbines accounts for about 65% of my cost of production. And so you can imagine the impact of stifled invoices on our generation outputs, our efficiency, and our capacity to deliver quality, reliable, and affordable electricity to Nigerians. But I do know that Mr. President also is looking into some interventions that will be able to ramp up liquidity in the sector, because across the entire sector, the recurring theme is cash flow crisis. And, and we cannot deliver quality services if we don't have the cash backing, because with the 30% of settlement on our invoices, we're also able to reflect that on our gas receivables and our obligations to our gas suppliers. And so we have escalating debts year on year in the industry. But we do believe, I'm very optimistic and I'm very positive that by the time we're able to ramp up liquidity in the sector, that the issues, the relatively suboptimal services that we're experiencing in the sector will become a thing of the past. And collectively, we can be able to advance Mr. President's renewed hope agenda for energy security.
All right, let's talk about the Electricity Act 2023. How exactly does it impact the company vis-a-vis commercial strategy?
The Electricity Act, I dare say, is a game changer for the sector, because what it has done, it has essentially opened up the market. Now, all players can transact business bilaterally vis-a-vis on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. And so that has opened the door of opportunities for us, and the opportunities are infinite. So we're able to engage off-takers, we're able to engage bilateral customers, we're able to engage eligible customers on a willing buyer and willing seller basis, and we're able to, back those transactions up with a PPA that is securitized and with bank guarantees, and then we're sure of our revenues. And then that way it will also help us to address those liquidity challenges, and we can improve our services. My overarching goal as the CEO of the company is to ramp up revenue for the company and improve our shareholder rewards. So I'm optimistic that the future looks bright and that we're making steady progress towards attaining Mr. President's renewed hope agenda.
And in just last month, you actually announced collaboration, with the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission to recoup some investments in assets, I think worth about 100 billion naira that was handed to the Transmission Company of Nigeria. What is the progress with that? Like I mentioned, the industry is highly regulated, and I trust in the capacity of the regulator to do the right thing. They're working on it. The discussions are now ongoing, and we're making progress. We're making progress. Mr. President is very keen on sustaining and driving change in this industry. And so these are some of the reforms that we're driving that would ensure that our collective gains are best served. But does this affect your viability in any way? I mean, these debts being owed?
We've been able to run the company even with the debts being owed. And that's because, like I mentioned earlier, we came prepared with a strategy. We have other sources and other streams of revenue that we can use to unlock resources to sustain our operational expenditures. And as you know, with my vast private sector and public sector experience, I'm able to leverage the core principles of corporate governance to be able to unlock, opportunities that can sustain the company. So yes, if we can unlock the stranded resources and debts being owed, for us, that will be the icing on the cake, and that will take our delivery to the next level.
All right. During a budget defense session recently, the Minister of Power, had asked for improved funding. I mean, that's just like a recurring decimal from these sessions. But then some would ask, is this
Absolutely.
Really justified considering the increased rates based on, bans, the tariffs and the general state of energy supply across the country?
Well, I'm representing a generation company. I can't speak to the other subsectors, but I do know that, yes, improved liquidity would help the NDPHC a lot, because we'll be able to ramp up our generation we'll be able to sustain these recovery plans that we have. Already we have potential off-takers and eligible customers that are beckoning on us every day, you know, coming for large volumes of electricity, which we have currently stranded. And so access to financing, access to funding will be able to help us scale our capacity to deliver access and quality, reliable and affordable electricity to the last mile.
Estimated billing is one huge challenge that a number of consumers have complained about. Customer satisfaction should be key. It is one of the things you mentioned as pivotal, in your administration. What are you doing, or what do you think can be? What kinds of collaborations can take place?
I'm the CEO of a generation company. We don't do billing. I'm not a CEO of a disco. So I wouldn't be able to hold brief for the discos on this matter. But I do know, like I already mentioned, that there are some parameters that drive the downstream markets, and billing efficiency is one. And so with the presidential metering initiative, as you would know, the president has already dedicated, funds that it's, I think, about 75 billion. In the first phase, 2 million meters are supposed to be deployed. And so that would improve collection efficiency. If that improves collection efficiency, billing efficiency and collection efficiency, then certainly across the entire value chain, the disco remittances would improve, quality of service will improve, and grade of service will improve.
The collaboration is also key, because if power is generated and it's not distributed, then, it really cannot be stored. It's been so great talking to you at this time. MD CEO, Niger Delta Power Holding Company, Jennifer Adighije. Thank you very much for your time on the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Abosede, and thank you, Nigerians.